Deflating, put him on his back. Thurston, right foot kick, down the ground, into the in goal almost. Hodgson cuts it off. Hodgson taken by Norton. He took him late. Marshall skips away. Marshall's still going. Marshall's got Richards coming up outside. Now inside. Richards pursued. He pushes Johnson away.
Good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, 27th of February, 2024. You're back for another episode of the Tiger Town podcast, and every week this year, we let you know that the show is brought to you by Best On Ground Digital, bestongrounddigital.com. They are the digital marketing agency that looks after the little guys. bestongrounddigital.com. They will not steer you wrong. They pushed us in the right direction. Apple Podcasts, we're on, we're flying. Happy days. I need to take a breath. I'm Zac. He's Toby. How are you, mate?
Yeah, mate. You know how I am. We've discussed this at length. I'm okay personally. I am distraught as a fan, but you know what? We'll get into that. But yeah, not too bad. Had an eventful weekend apart from the horrendous performance on Saturday. But yeah, had my little one's first birthday, so the littlest out of the two. And
very exciting.
Nice. And then that was on the Saturday day, and then the day was ruined by a Saturday performance. So,
I thought you were going to say the day was ruined when I showed up to the birthday party.
It's generally the case, but something else ruined it even more so. So,
very kind of you to not say that, by the way.
Mate, the banter comes thick and fast, but I think that we got bigger problems, bigger fish to fry this week.
Mudgy fish, mudgy cod.
Yeah, whatever they're called.
34-18, West Tigers lost in the second trial to St George Illawarra Dragons. Saturday night, about 7 o'clock up our way in terms of time, mate. Very, very briefly, because obviously we're going to tear this a new one, as it were. What did you notice about the game? What caught your eye?
We never got out of first gear. That's all. I can put it in one sentence. We never got out of first gear. And that was disappointing. Very disappointing to watch.
Yep. I think you took the words right out of my mouth, because I think I said that.
I figured you were going to say something along those lines, so I thought I'd get in ahead of you. It's a good analogy.
Well, did you think that, I guess I said it 5 or 6 times in the chat over the last couple of days. That might have given you an indication that's the direction I was heading. I agree.
No, I thought of that all on my own.
I bet you did. Yeah, I agree. It's been said multiple times already by numerous people and numerous talking heads, but it just seemed as though the side simply did not show up this week. As Benji himself said in his post-match interview, St George ran harder, they tackled harder, and in many ways, that is 3/4 of the battle, particularly in a trial. Tell me or show me a appointment to a player that doesn't have one eye on round one, or in our case, round two, by the time the second trial rolls around, particularly as the game wears on. But I think, mate, Dragons were far too good on the day, and I think it starts and ends with attitude. And obviously, we'll have a look at some of those issues today. But yeah, there's a bit more to talk about other than just attitude as well, though, mate, isn't there?
100%. I think, like you said, sometimes it's a very simple reason why a team loses. And Benji said it in the post-match conference or the post-match interview. They just ran harder and tackled harder, and he was disappointed because a big thing is he's like, I never thought we had to question our attitude come game day, and it wasn't like it was one or two that didn't really bring it that day. I felt like there wasn't anyone that really stood out and tried to lead from the front. I think Clemmer was the only one that actually reached over 100 running meters the whole time. Could be wrong by that, but I'm pretty certain that's what I saw.
I'll get the facts for you. So just to set you a bit straight on that, Steph ran for 187 metres.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Jareem, 173.
Maybe
Charlie Staines, 100 from the back. Aiden Caesar ran for 101. Steph, the aforementioned, 187. Clemmer, 150. Seyfarth, 138. Fanua Pole, 136 metres off the bench. So,
then I was obviously wrong with that, but
No, but the sentiment, the sentiment's valid, isn't it? That, you didn't see that anybody sort of stood out.
No, or I think it's been very at length. It's been recorded, or reported on how well Galvin slotted in, no matter where they put him. I think Benji said he put him in 4 different positions, and he didn't look out of place in either of them. I think that he showed why there's been so much hype about him, but in saying that, he's still 18 years old. We've said that about a lot of players. We said it about Brooks when he was 18 years old. So, don't put too much pressure on the kid, but he definitely didn't look out of place in a first-grade jersey.
Yeah.
But apart from him, Buller did Buller things, but he also made some uncharacteristic mistakes. I think Asu Kapoa has played himself out of a jersey the last 2 weeks. I don't think I'd be very surprised if he's picked in my 18. I'm pretty certain he was hooked halfway through that first half and never came back on. So wasn't given another shot. I think somebody that I highlighted last week was Seyfarth. I thought he did a very simple game plan and it worked for him. Went back to the old Seyfarth this game. Got bumbled in got locked up in a few tackles. Was slow off the ruck. Made a couple of Seyfarth errors. So it was... Yeah, I think saying that it was disappointing was probably being light on the situation. Even though it was a trial, there was a lot of things I expected from it, and none of it came to fruition. So,
Yep. Yeah, a few things that we'll probably expand on a little bit later in the show in there. Most definitely, the talk about Galvin, we'll get to him obviously later, one of the few shining lights on the weekend. For me, mate, I think the sentiment overall was just a flattening. And I think it comes from effectively when we've had this sort of phoenix from the ashes narrative, as it were, over the course of the off-season, where we've had the board removed, administration removed, so many good stories around that, this sort of sense around the club of rebirth, I guess, and starting positively again. I think we sort of, we can get a bit carried away down and myself, I'm as guilty as anybody, get a little bit carried away down the Disney storyline approach and thinking that this year we're going to make an improvement, no doubt. There'll be promising signs. And then Jerome will come next year and that will definitely push us into the top 7, 8, 6. And then the following year, we're going to be pushing top 4 and then we're challenging for premiership. And I think sometimes we can put the cart before the horse and think that this process is linear. And so I think that a lot of people, ourselves included, off the back of the Warriors game, we deliberately tried to look at the positives, and we mentioned that in last week's show. But then to sort of end this tumultuous but positive feeling off season, I guess, with a performance like that, there's a number of words that you can say, the likes of underwhelming and whatnot as well. Yeah, it's flattening. So heading into the season, that whole sort of goodwill and positivity over the off season, that sense of rebirth that many of us were feeling, has sort of been extinguished to a degree. I think, those amongst us that are pretty resilient in the hope department can still, we'll still...
I think that's every Tigers fan, mate.
Yeah, we'll still champion the cause. And we'll all be there come round two. There's the obvious caveat with this type of commentary that it is a trial, and I'm a gigantic believer in that there's so many more factors that go into these types of trial games, even things that aren't completely obvious at first glance, that lend themselves to indicate that a trial is simply a trial, and it's not to be taken as form or anything. But that's short story long about that overall underwhelming feeling and sense, I guess, and it just flattened a little bit of that early season excitement. But it only takes a game or two and a good performance to turn that around, and I guess now's time to sort of break down why we think that performance was there. So I mentioned in the show's opening, mate, attitude. For you, what sort of behaviours or things did you see that spoke to attitude specifically in the game? You got a couple of points?
For me, it basically was from the get-go. I mean, when a team runs hard, you look to match that aggression. You look to match that. Looks like no one wanted to. You had Jaden Sewer basically demolishing that left side. Moses Sully just running over the top of people. And we know Moses Sully's a big boy. He's very big for a centre, very strong, very powerful. But the only person that you had to look at some of the players that tried to lift the team through, I guess, that aggression was that you kind of need a little bit of the old Clem back to really start to spark something. And then when Olam came in for that side, came in from the side and put that shot on Lomax, I expected everyone to get around him, like, yeah, good Warren, good one. No one did. No one even bothered. They just, granted, the set was still going, but even I think I can't remember who came in with him. Maybe it was Sullivan. I'm not sure who came in with him, but whoever was second marker didn't even pat him on the back or anything like that. And I'm like, for me, that's attitude. It's not like, you and I both played. We've seen, we've watched rugby league now for 37 years, basically. And whenever a shot like that happens, you expect your teammates to rise and to lift, and you expect that pat on the back from the second marker or from the team coming in, whatever it is. But none of that was evident. It was like they were going through the motions, and that there is what kind of highlighted the attitude for me, was how much we know we need to improve on, but they're not willing to show it on the field, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in regards to, because there was a couple of shots, because Junior Tupou put a shot on a little bit later himself as well.
Yeah.
I didn't particularly notice that, especially. So if that's something you notice, then that would be a sign of it, I guess. And, all the talk we've heard out of the club over the off-season has been about how tight this group is. Like I said, I didn't notice any of that. I'd be very, very surprised if that would be the case in a trial game. But, maybe that was the way that that you saw it at the time. And it'd be interesting to see what the sort of body language was around that too. I think that for me, it was twofold. I guess the attitude shows up in a number of areas, doesn't it? It's effort areas like kick chase and line speed and stuff like that. Obviously, all those areas were somewhat flat. You mentioned earlier, in reference to me, my friend, that looked like they were in first gear. And to me, it was any time we were running any sort of shape or backline swing, as limited as those were, it looked like it was done in slow motion, which was not dissimilar to how we saw certain shapes in the past year or two. The line speed itself wasn't very good. But back to what I said before in terms of the attitude is twofold. For me, in defence, you're looking at defence, and I'm looking at first up contact. So is someone using their shoulder, or are we exclusively catching? Okay, so obviously it depends upon the size of the person. If you're a Jake Simkin trying to tackle a Safa Solomoni, you've got to do a lot of catching. Your shoulders, your AC joints need to be protected a little bit there. But I didn't see a whole lot of solid first up contact. Initially, I did. And I'm actually going to go against something you said earlier in terms of efforts to spark the team. I thought Steph was really good. I thought he's played an up-tempo game. I thought he got up and I thought he whacked in defence and hit that first up contact. He made a lot of metres and played decent minutes too. So personally, just off what you were saying earlier, I was relatively happy, or really, really happy actually with Steph. I thought he's probably had a pretty good couple of trials. There's not many people we could say that have done that. The second thing I wanted to go back to, other than that first up contact in defence, when I'm looking for effort areas or attitude areas, is going to be efforts around the ruck. And so for me, and I'm sure many other people listening as well, when you see a tackle in the modern game and you see them position themselves deliberately, particularly when they're working in pairs, trying to place the player on their back or trying to get them in a position that is disadvantageous for them to get up and play the ball really quick, just trying to essentially slow them down, self-tangle. It's that initial stopping of momentum now is only half of the tackle, isn't it? It's the process in being able to get them to the ground slowly often, because they're trying to slow that process. And then there's even that third phase where they're trying to escape that tackle and get back into marker, escape that ruck and get back into marker in a timely fashion. That on the weekend was fucking woeful. So that giant explanation, all simply to put an exclamation point on that. And dead set, mate, I reckon in that first half when they walked all over us, and we did bring it back a bit in the second, though it wasn't a gigantic improvement. I think the second half was a bit of an improvement. That was, in my eyes, the single leading cause as to why we got rolled in the way that we did in that first half. And at that point, the game was over, obviously. Seyfarth, you mentioned earlier, was disgusting at it on the weekend. His first up contact was soft. It was like getting hit with a wet lettuce. So he's getting dominated on the ground. More often than not, they would find their front. And if he attempted to tangle himself to try to slow the ruck, they either got penalised. I think he incurred a penalty for it. But on 3 occasions, the bloke was playing the ball by the time he was still trying to scoot back around the outside. So he's either putting himself at risk for being not square at marker and conceding a penalty, or they get massive advantage with a one marker situation. It was bad for a bloke that, and this is with the caveat of talking about him a week or so prior, as you said, playing okay and doing a decent job at lock, or at least a satisfactory job at lock. For a bloke that's supposed to be, or has every chance to be, the starting middle, starting 13, you've got to be better than that. Because he was just getting steamrolled in the ruck. And then, as you said, off the back of that momentum early in their sets, they were throwing to the Sewers and that's a weird statement, to the Jaden Sewers of the world, okay, and the Moses Sulis of the world with that momentum and our somewhat dishevelled defensive line, particularly on that right-hand side that was off on the short side. I couldn't believe myself watching Seyfarth do it time after time repetitively early in that first half. He wasn't the only one, but, mate, the effort areas around first up contact and the small wrestle in the ruck, within the rules, but the small wrestle was non-existent. It led, in my opinion, to that gathering momentum, which they then used their strengths, their big bodies out wide. And as we've discussed, and many others have as well, they used that to steamroll us. We took no control of the ruck early. Steph and Clem were running hard for mine. Seyfarth got between A and B defenders a few times and ran hard and got over the ad line. But the control of the ruck was terrible. Who was it Casey Badger on the weekend?
Yeah.
She was fine. I'll say, disclaimer, she was fine generally overall, except I reckon her control of the ruck was abysmal. I'm saying we equally contributed. I think it was very, very inconsistent the way that was ruled. Not for better or worse for us, but I'm just saying I think that the off the mark, play the balls off the mark. I sent a message in our chat earlier in the game saying that very thing. I don't think that helped our case, but look, let's bring it all back to us because that's all we control. The ruck was terrible. And I think that most of our problems, at least on a defensive aspect, started from there.
I definitely agree with that on a defensive perspective. But go back to Steph and what you were talking about in terms of he was good. I don't disagree with that. I think Steph ran hard, has that little step at the line. We all love that. The thing that the Dragons did that we didn't was someone ran hard on the Dragons. It got everyone else to run hard the next play.
Yeah.
Steph or Clem run hard. The next play is a soft, wet as lettuce, soggy cardboard box run. It wasn't the attitude that you needed to back it up. Yeah. There is a very simple game plan in the early parts of most games. And that is for the first 20 minutes, it is a 3-up, hard run, wear out the middle, spread it on the 4th, kick on the 5th. Most teams tend to do that structure time in and time out the first 15, 20 minutes. That's when the expansive football comes in.
Correct. Sorry to interrupt you. Have you put a hole in that table yet, or are you still chipping away at it?
I'm pissed off. I'm that pissed off.
Just for the listeners, he's not tapping the mic. He's semi-thumb.
I'm hitting my desk.
You're trying to be emphatic, mate, aren't you?
Yeah. Look, I'm passionate. I'm a passionate Tiger supporter.
Absolutely.
But that was the thing. I mean, you can individualize performances, but when one team goes in a certain or has a certain direction in terms of their aggression, in terms of how they are turning up in their attitude and everything like that, and you don't match that, that is when I guess the attitude really plays such an important role. Yeah.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? As you said earlier, we've played a fair bit of sport. We played a fair bit together as well, and some days you're just off. Some days you can feel it in the sheds, and I'm not offering any sort of excuse for those attitude metrics that we're talking about. But hopefully, we can only hope. Hopefully, it was one of those days, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't there. Again, not excusing it, but we can pontificate all we want about why the attitude wasn't quite where it was even the week prior, or what we would expect out of a second trial. But there's going to be reasons for that, mate. I want to parlay that into something we did today. So we ran a poll today on our Instagram. If you're not on our Instagram, Tiger Town Podcast, what are you doing, first and foremost? Secondly, head to our Instagram, Tiger Town Podcast, and feel free to jump on board. No, so we ran a poll this afternoon and basically asked the question, what is the biggest thing we need to improve for our first game, round 2, in 3 weeks' time? Quite a good little spread of votes across here. So we had the option of defence, attack in the red zone, depth, and other. Now, other didn't specify, but other was 6% of the vote. Depth was 6% of the vote as well. So other reasons and the depth being an issue at the moment, at least between now and round 2, don't seem to be the major problem. As you would expect, defence, which I think we've partially covered, I guess, in terms of attitude, won out with 48%, and then attack in the red zone was 40%. So pretty equally split there with people following along on our Instagram on that poll. Mate, we will move to talking about the attack a little bit and why we think that broke down somewhat. But in terms of the defensive structures, do you think there was anything major missing, or was it more a case of what we were talking about earlier with the attitude and the small 1% types of things that just weren't there on the day?
Yeah, I think it was more just the 1%ers, the people that, the effort on effort just wasn't there. You have a look at some of the stats, and it's 8 line breaks to 3 during the game. A lot of that was off second phase play and maybe a fend from Sully or a fend from Sewer. If you have I think maybe Sully himself got 4 line breaks, and a lot of that was from a tackle bust. So our slide defense wasn't horrible. Our goal line defense, structure-wise, wasn't that bad, apart from second week in a row, Kapoa's come out of the line when he didn't need to and created another scoring opportunity.
Just a single bad miss, wasn't it?
Single
Again.
bad miss. It's becoming a theme, and that was something we talked about last week. There is a footballer there, but it's these choices that is stopping him from becoming a good footballer. And
I use the word. I know that a lot of people listening probably won't disagree with our criticism of Kapoa, and rightly so. But I used the word last week, liability.
Yeah,
he's at the stage where he's a liability in the side defensively, as in he's very likely to cost you a try or close to a try a game at this stage. Just not only from what we've seen, but history.
100%. And it's for him. It just seems to be between the ears. He can put a shot on. He can run hard, but he does not make the smart decisions.
No. So, mate. So you're the same as me. You're leaning more so to talking about that commitment aspect, the attitude aspect, the 1%ers in defence, as opposed to a structural breakdown. I think the only time they got close to sort of outmanoeuvring us from a structural standpoint was the one you spoke about, which was the structure broke down because AJ Kapoa was there, and the decision was woeful once more, like it was last week. You would think someone would learn from that. Outside of that, there were several crash plays. They had a kick to the corner that, look, it was a brilliant kick, but on any given day, 6, 7, 8 times out of 10, that pulls up short, or it bounces sideways over the dead ball or the in goal or whatever it might be. They had the Ben Hunt chip, which is a 50-50 with Caesar, and he happened to managed to reef it out. They had the one later that they had 2 borderline knockbacks before Ben Hunt happened to land in his hands. He chipped ahead and scored. So they didn't strike me as a team that sort of pulled us apart, which I guess is a positive. Because if we're looking overall at how their tries were scored, and I know that they had other issues around line breaks and whatnot that you discussed, but to me that is also a case of attitude, because like you said, it was second phase, was up the middle, was around the ruck, right? More so than getting outstripped for numbers or bad decisions on good attacking plays where they make line breaks with the extra man. I think that a lot of the tries that they scored could be not explained away, but at least they weren't scored from, as we said, they weren't scored from poor structure. They weren't scored from a system of defence that broke down traditionally, I guess, or that was pulled apart specifically by the opposition. Does that make sense, or am I talking in circles?
No. That's what I was getting at. Like, it's the effort on effort is what was what let us down from a defensive perspective. It wasn't the structure. It wasn't. I don't think it was the talk either. You had to look. There was quite a bit of talk in the defensive line. It was just. At some points, it felt like they didn't want to hurt themselves because round two's coming up.
Yeah,
that's my thought. But that's at the end of the day. I think you mentioned it at the start. Yeah, the last trial is kind of where you need to hit your straps before the season starts. Obviously, for obvious reasons, because you don't have another trial before the season starts. You know, been a bit of a loop there, but
yeah,
it's just you said it actually in our chat the day of during the game. The Dragons were playing like it was a semi. We were playing it like we were training down at Concord.
yeah.
So
That's what it looked like.
You can't match that.
No. And a big part of me for the last few days has really thought that not that was deliberate, but we didn't put as many sheep stations on the line for this particular trial and getting the win. For me, it looked like Flanagan challenged his men to go out there and play as hard as possible to try to build their confidence heading into the season. For me, it looked like Benji basically had a game plan with one hand in his pocket, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And I know in what I've heard out of him in his post-match interview, the brief one, it didn't appear, his response didn't appear like that. But to me, the gameplay within the game, particularly in that first part, I think we opened up and loosened the shackles a little bit later in the game, and had success, mind you. I think the first part of that game was very much what we spoke about last week when it comes to the Warriors. I think we played an overly simplistic brand of football for a variety of reasons. We can only speculate, but one of them possibly being that we want to keep some of our shapes and whatnot in the kit bag until the season proper, and not blow all of our secrets immediately. The other side of the coin could be that they've gone out there and he's basically said, look, for these two trials, we just want to get the basics right. And I've got something to back that up, and it's the stats on the weekend. So on the weekend, everything has two sides, right? So some of these stats might actually also be an indictment on our ability to attack, but just bear with me. So in support of the fact that possibly we played an oversimplistic game plan to try to just get through this with some reps in the not reps in the tank, but to get a few reps up. 54% of possession. We had a 95% completion rate,
which is ridiculous.
And as you would expect, we have more runs, so we had marginally more run meters, although their run meter per run is better. More post contact, as you would expect. Obviously, less line breaks. But it's more that earlier component that I was talking about, the likes of what are simplistic game plans when we're looking at approaching a game of football. Hold on to the ball, keep it simple through the middle, largely one-out plays, risk aversion, aim for simple repeat sets, and generally try to play that territory-based football. You agree?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. When you really look at the stats, like if you keep going down, you have a look at the amount of offloads Dragons had compared to us. It was almost double the amount. And, you and I are big advocates of second phase play. It's what opens up a game. Hence why I still believe that's why they made so many meters through Sewer and Sully. More total passes, more kicking meters, 3 forced dropouts. A lot of these are those fundamentals, I guess, that we haven't really done much of over the last few years. But it's just the thing that frustrated me, and I'm okay if we have these stats because we've earned I'm okay, to have those stats early on in the game, but to have those sort of, I guess, decrease a little bit because we've earned the right to play football. We just never started playing football. And again, like you said, possibly it's deliberate.
Yeah.
But for me, it's put question marks in my head. I'm sure it's put question marks in a lot of fans' head over Aiden Caesar, whether he's actually back, or whether he's here and he's going to make any difference. It's put a lot of question marks on who our outside back should be, because there were players that either didn't get the ball or when they got the ball did nothing. Um, I think Olam was solid. I think he ran hard. Toa, I barely saw, if I'm being honest. And again, maybe we didn't go that side, but I'm pretty certain we went on that side a fair few times. He didn't go looking for the ball. I mean, having a look at his stats.
The Dragons certainly went that side.
The Dragons definitely did.
Yeah.
He had
Before you, I might just cut you off, and we might just go down through our 17 or through our squad, and we'll get to Taylor in a sec, and we won't do the extended director's cut version of each player, but just generally sort of how we thought they played during the game. So Buller,
again, yeah, I probably expect more from Buller, but he was solid. He made a pretty costly error in the first half, which was a pretty easy one, to be honest. He just timed his run up wrong and dropped the ball, and I think they scored off the next play.
In his defence in that one too, I think his shepherder or his escort did a terrible job of getting in his way. He basically ran straight back into his line, which was Tupou. So yeah, poor from Tupou again, inexperience again.
But again, Buller did what Buller does, ran for 173 metres. So,
yeah, he did, and he sliced through for an absolutely gorgeous try. Holy dooly, that looked amazing.
Silky, isn't he?
He moves so well, mate. It's unbelievable. Charlie Staines, now, he ran for 102 metres as you expect out of the backfield. Probably saw a little bit more out of Charlie than we did in the Warriors game, but once again, not playing that expansive football and then not kicking to his wing, I don't think, either. When we did kick, we went to lob. He hasn't really seen much action.
He really hasn't. I mean, like, he made 2 tackles so that just shows how much they went to. Like, they went as far that side in the attack as well. It was always Sura or Sully just didn't bother going to, I think,
they were one in there. They're at Tower and Bud all day.
Yeah.
Obviously, weren't they? They're trying to attack that point. And knowing Bud Sullivan relatively well, I think they're probably pretty familiar with his defence and sought to exploit it, mate. Juzzy Olam, so he had a bit of a truncated session. He played 20-odd minutes and then copped a bump to the knee. We thought he was gone for the game, and then he came back on a bit later. His highlight was obviously the big hit on Lomax that you mentioned before. We know he's got that in his game. But once again, we didn't really get the ball to Olam that much. He was very held back.
I think he had maybe, what does it say? He had 3 runs. But that was all him coming out of trouble. But 3 runs for 32 metres coming out of trouble is not bad. So So
it is, and we know the value of him, particularly in those situations. And as he warms in, gets a bit of match fitness as well, because as he said out of his own mouth, he was a bit injured in the off season. He's only just returning from that knee, so he'll be right. Will be good when he's in the side for the entire game. And again, you don't know what role him coming off randomly in the first half, which I don't think was the plan. What role that played, I should say, in how we defended, but obviously a lot of that damage did happen early. Now, you were talking about Stafford before. Stafford had a pretty bad miss on, I think it was Sully a bit earlier. He just got swatted off. That does happen. And, I agree with you. I didn't really sight him that much. I think he made one good little incisive run, and I was like, I can see if we remember Stafford from last year, deceptively strong, I think.
Well, here's another stat to back up why I'm sort of question marks on him, because think about how far Tape went in game 1. We both said he might be a smoky. Toa had 8 missed tackles.
There you go.
Personally, and that's outside, so they put a lot of traffic on him. But Bud had 2.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
A lot of those defensive deficiencies out there seems to be Toa just falling off tackles.
It's pretty not demanding. It's pretty. What's the word I'm looking for? Words escape me. It's a bit of an indictment on him. It's pretty damning. Pretty damning on poor old Star out there, isn't it? Yeah, not a good first game back. He obviously hit a rampaging Sully. Which, hello, have you ever seen Moses Sully ever play like that?
No.
So I hope he didn't spend it all in the trial there, Dragons fans, but he doesn't have a history of being overly consistent.
Sully, started off as a West Tiger and then couldn't find his way, and then went to Manly, found his way, and then
went to the Bulldogs. Went to the Bulldogs, got sacked.
I don't even think he played a game for the Bulldogs, did he?
No, he didn't. He was found sleeping in his car.
That's right.
So, yes, it does open up that centre spot in some ways. At the very least, it does it tear up the mortgage that we thought Star might have had on that position. It brings Naden into the equation.
I don't think he has that mortgage anymore. I think he's got.
I don't think it's very likely, but I think even like you mentioned, even the likes of Fatape come into consideration. Do they consider putting a junior? Do they consider putting a junior Tupou in and playing Lob on the wing? Lob hasn't exactly done himself any misfavours. He's played relatively well. That's interesting. Well, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out, and we'll talk a bit more about that in the coming weeks as we head towards round 2. Junior Tupou, mate.
Didn't set the world on fire, but didn't make any big mistakes like he did the week prior. Ran hard, as we come to expect from Tupou. Ran from almost 100 metres, and again, a lot of that was probably out of danger.
Yeah,
didn't get enough ball to our outside backs for them to really do much damage in the red zone. So
we didn't. No, we barely played any shape. The only piece of shape we played is when Lachlan Galvin swang from the right. Swang, is that a word? Should be. Sounds glorious.
I'm good with that.
He swung all the way from the right around to the left-hand side, play the ball to chime into the line to throw the ball to Buller for Buller to slice through. That was about the only and best shape we played for most of the game. So, yeah, you're correct. Our outside men didn't get a lot of ball, but as we saw, Star had a lot of traffic come his way, mate. Bud, you mentioned, on that side, relatively good tackle efficiency. That was a good effort on his behalf, mate. What about him in attack?
Again, does it come down to what Benji wanted him to do, to the terms of the structure and things like that? But he never looked threatening. Never looked like something was going to eventuate out of his hands. It looked like he was going through the motions. Was that the game plan? Who knows? You just can't get inside someone's brain because of that. But I'll probably say this for everyone on this team, apart from maybe one player, didn't set the world on fire for me. But looking at his tackle efficiency, during the game, obviously, when you're watching it live, you're not watching stats, you're not watching this and that up. When things are moving as fast as they are, you automatically think that if there's a issue on outside your centres or out that way, it's most likely going to come from the half not doing his job. I think Bud did well in terms of sliding, pushing, everything like that. So I couldn't complain about him, but I didn't see enough for me to be excited about it. So
yeah, I think that he and Caesar can be very much bundled into the same type of bundle, as it were, on the weekend. It looks to me, like I said earlier, like they had a very, very, very simple game plan. And if that is the case, then they stuck to it well. And maybe the coaches are relatively happy with that. I can't imagine they're happy with the performance overall or our success rate or whatnot. But maybe they weren't going out there trying to create numerous and sundry opportunities. Don't know. It's hard to say. Yeah, both of those blokes were underwhelming. I hope, for our sake, that it was based upon a simple game plan they executed well, to a degree at least, and not the fact that we're looking at playing a slow, bland, overly simplistic style of football for the entire season, because I don't think that we have the class, or in fact I know we don't have the class in the outside backs in particular, or the halves for that matter at this stage, to be able to capitalise on that. So this side is going to have to be a side that has to get creative in my eyes, and I think that with our third playmaker there at dummy half in Appy probably having one of his worst games I can remember in the jersey, I don't think that did anybody any favours either.
No.
And, it might have, like we said, maybe it was just something in the dressing room that day. But that's Bud and Caesar, mate. We spoke about Steph earlier, both quite pleased. I was extremely happy with his game and both trials, I think, for that matter. I think he improved on the first trial. If Steph can bring that's a bit of consistency. Both stints were excellent, and I'm very happy with that. Mate, I mentioned Appy. You're talking about tackles. So Appy tackled at 72.97% for the statisticians out there. 27 tackles, 9 missed, and 1 ineffective. But it was a bit more than that with Appy.
It was.
What do you make of his performance?
Well, since Appy's been to the club, again, the one thing we could never fault was him leading by example. He was a leader on and off the field every single time. He, you know, if if someone needed to push out of the line to have something done, it was generally him straight away. He looked like he was holding back, waiting for someone else to do it. There was no urgency to what he was trying to do. There was, you have a look at that tackle efficiency. There was no commitment. There was no. I guess it just wasn't the Appy that we've all come to know. Even before he was in the Tigers jersey, it's just who Appy is. Ever since he won a grand final with South back in 2014, it's just who Appy is.
Yeah,
and it didn't look like the Appy we've come to know.
Yeah, I agree. It was another one that was a bit puzzling. He just looked a bit flat on the weekend. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. We'll wipe the slate clean, being that it's a trial, and we're hoping this is just an aberration and a one-off, as it were, or at the very least, in terms of the things we've spoken about. Mate, Clem had a pretty decent game, albeit I reckon probably outshone a little bit by Steph. 23 tackles out of 23 for 100% tackle efficiency. He out-twelved 12, who only tackled at an 85% efficiency. Maybe because he positions himself right in front of the props and they just run straight at him. He also ran for 150 metres off 18 runs, mate. And how long did he play for? It doesn't have that stat there with us today. So, I thought Clem was pretty solid, mate. I thought both their starting props were probably two of our better players, to be honest. And as per usual, generally speaking, unless they are knocking the barn doors down, a prop playing well doesn't always stand out, particularly in a poor performance.
No, it's pretty much the same story as last year. Clem and Steph leading from the front, getting us down into the attacking zone, and us just not having any real danger to make that into something. That's how it looked like to me. Clem for me is what I have come to expect from Appy in terms of commitment. I think no matter, I can't remember a game, and that's including these two preseasons, because I think he did it again, triple digits. Can't remember a game in the Tigers jersey where Clem has not hit triple digits. He always runs for over 100 metres. And that's just because he always puts his hands up and wants that run, wants that drive, wants to find his front, get up, make sure that we get the ball rolling. But nobody was there apart from definitely Steph, in terms of following that 1-2 punch.
Yep. Isaiah Papali'i, largely unsighted for me. I know he did a little bit early. He played a bit of up-tempo stuff early, but I've been a critic of his since he's back. If we recall back several dozens of episodes, back when he was finishing up his time at Parramatta in his defence, we saw another one of those efforts. 77% he tackled that. So made 31, 3 ineffective, 6 missed. It's a concern for me, and I've spoken about his lateral movement before. He tends to overcommit on the inside crash player, and then he's not the quickest laterally, and so that can leave at least some uncertainty in his outside man to cover across. So, definitely. I don't know that we were stripped in that way in particular, but for me, those numbers are a bit of a worry. Outside of that, I don't remember a whole lot of Ice being involved in the game.
No, I can't really even remember him taking a run, to be honest. Obviously he did. He's got run meters on the board, but obviously wasn't something that really took my eye.
Yeah, I think he was another one. He's another one on that side with Star, so playing on that right.
Yeah.
Between them, actually.
Owned by Sewer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really disappointing for someone who's looking to get back to top form. And it looked like the tempo to which he was playing last week and the start of this game looked like that's what he's trying to re-achieve. But between him and Star, I mean, we had 14 missed tackles and 4 ineffective between the two of them. In playing limited minutes, mind you, because each of them, played a lot less than they would in a regular game, which, again, is another concern. Yeah, not his best game, so let's hope again. It was another something in the water out at Mudgee. We spoke about Asu Kapoa, just did Asu Kapoa things. I'm going to move on from him. Anything you want to add about Seafarth? I was very, very disappointed to the point of putting a line through him. I'm not willing to have the ruck owned, and him being the lock, he essentially owns the middle in a lot of ways, or sets the tempo and the pace in the middle. Mate, I can't have that ruck owned like that. We will get walked over every game.
Not at all. I so much so I didn't put a line through him for the 17. I put a line through him for my starting 13. I've replaced him for 12. I think as soon as 12 came on, that middle just got a lot tighter. 12 just did what 12 does. He's not he's not the flashiest by far. He's not an Olam hitter or anything like that. I was put the big shots on, but he will get you to the ground and he will make sure that middle is controlled and tight. And that's just what we missed that completely.
I mentioned 12 earlier, tackled at 85.7%. Let's round that up to 86. Isn't it funny looking at somebody tackling at 86% and saying that is terrible?
Yeah, that's for 12.
Yeah,
that's so funny. Like, we just don't expect those efficiencies from 12.
So you're leaning back towards 12 as your 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
If that's the way, it's very clear that Benji wants to go that way in terms of a lock.
Yeah.
Just to tighten up that middle, to have essentially a third prop there as well. So if that's the way Benji is going, yes, 12 over Seafarth every day of the week now.
Okay. Those of you following along with the list just in your head would not fail to miss the fact we've skipped over number 14, Mr. Galvin, because we're going to come back to him because I think we're going to talk about him for a little bit longer. So we move on to Polo there. So I'm surprised by Polo's tackle efficiency, or in some ways I'm not. I did see him bump off a few. He's got to be better at wrapping. However, I thought Polo actually offset it pretty well with his first up contact. I thought he hit better than anyone in the game on the weekend, but maybe those couple of hits from our left-hand side defence in the one-off Olam and Junior Tupou. Wasn't that a belter? That was unreal. Anyway, I digress.
I love the Olam one. If you watch it in slow motion, I just love those hits. Like every time you see the Sonny Bill on Joel Clinton hit, and his head just flicks back and the sweat just flies. That's how it was like. It was just,
that was Tupou, wasn't it? That was Tupou on Bird.
No, that was Olam on Lomax when you just saw that. Well, right. In saying that, Bird probably did it as well. Both were pretty similar shots in terms of, I guess, intensity. But
beautiful. So Pole, I didn't mind that, and I actually thought he played relatively well. I thought he brought. I keep using that word tempo. Sorry, but I thought he brought that higher tempo when he came on.
Night and day to the Warriors game for me.
Yes, it was. Yeah, a vast improvement, and he needed it, to be honest, because he was underwhelming, as we spoke about last week. 15 runs for 136 metres, very impressive. So I thought he, and actually his partner in crime next underneath him, Samuela Fainu, who I am just continually impressed by. I thought Sam Fainu was probably a close second in terms of the impetus, I'll say, in defence, that first shoulder contact. When those two came on, I thought we hit harder, and I thought that was doing a better job at starting to slow that ruck at the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, while Kapoa has played himself out of a starting 17 jersey, I think Sam has played himself into a 17 jersey. I think he, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bateman will be fit for round 2.
As far as I know, yeah.
So, Bateman comes straight into that second row position. For me, Kapoa just out completely because you can't keep somebody that is playing has that intensity that you need off the bench like Sam is right now. So,
yep, I agree. Very happy with Sam and his off-season, everything he's put forward so far, and he's only going to get better and better. So, great player, glad to have him.
19?
I think he's 19. He might have just, as I said last week, might have recently turned 20. If not, he'll be turning 20 this year. So
he's got the world at his
he certainly does.
At the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks a good one. His older brother Sione, we didn't see as much of him in this game. Similar. I barely noticed him. I think he played in that middle for a little bit. 14 tackles, one missed.
Yeah, I think he was, again, he wasn't a world beater, but I didn't see anything of him to make me detract from his performance last week either. So
Yeah, mate. Then we had Jake Simkin obviously come on and play a little bit of a role. Unfortunately, I think Jake tried to chase the game a little bit and took a couple of wrong options, a couple of you call them selfish options, but if he barges over, then it's a try. It's a brilliant option. But we know what we get with Jake. I think for the most part, I think he's going to tackle his heart out. I think he's going to struggle to. I was talking about before, he's going to need help controlling that ruck, but I think he's a good defender. I just think that given his size and given the way that in his tackling technique, I think that can slow us a little bit in the middle or cost us a little bit in the middle. So his service I thought was pretty good for the most part. And certainly, I guess, with Appy playing that bit of a flat game himself, it's not like Jake appeared miles behind him in this game, which is more testament to how Appy played, I think, than Jake. Yeah, mate. All I'm going to do is just rattle off the rest of the names. We didn't see Alamalo get on the field, but we've got Mason, Lobb, Willett, Vaihu. I don't think he got on himself, and Sukar got on for a short. Oh, sorry, Vaihu did get on, and Sukar, mate. Anything you want to mention out of those names very quickly? We obviously saw young Heath Mason get himself a little try.
I think from what I saw against the Warriors with Heath Mason, I definitely saw improvement. So potentially what we saw in terms of, I guess, the deficiencies that I saw in terms of Mason against the Warriors, partially that was due to confidence, I believe. So I think he built a little bit more confidence. I thought he was a big improver in the second trial. Obviously, he's not going to get a start for a while. He's still quite young. He's still got a bit to develop. But, I didn't mind what I saw from Mason this week.
Yeah. No, I was the same. Obviously, the trial was a nice little moment for him, but he had some work to do. And it wasn't only that. There was a couple of little moments earlier as well where he is on the spot. And I think he might be one of those players that has that knack for being in the right spot at the right time. And as you said, very young, but very, very willing. I mean, similar to Galvin, he played schoolboys last year. So
yeah,
it's deceptive in the headgear. And Heath's pretty well built for his age, young fella. And he's got a decent set of cojones, let's say. Keep it PG.
He's still eligible for SG?
Yes, mate, he is. In fact, I'm going to get to that in a minute. He's playing fullback on the weekend. So, no, he played quite well, I agree. I guess we mentioned briefly, we saw a little bit of Lobb. You know, he was somewhat impressive. Again, what I did say after the Warriors trials, he needs to learn how to use his frame in contact a little bit more. He certainly did that. He ran hard and he leant into each tackle and got low, and it was good to see. He didn't always get the result. He does. Alex, love you, buddy. Send us a signed jersey. Cheers. He can
have the jersey.
Yeah, exactly. Look, mate, earlier I briefly mentioned, it might not have been picked up on the mic, that I think Fa'atape is not anywhere near likely to be picked, but he's certainly in the conversation for sent off Stafford's performance. I think Lobb is in the same boat. I don't think he's necessarily likely for a second round start, but I think he's definitely in the conversation. And as you said before, he's probably one of those players that has played himself into contention. So good on him.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep. We liked, we didn't see as much as Sukar this week, but again, he looks a solid little development player. He can keep chipping away and improving down in the lower grades. Young Nav Willett got another short little run. Again, we didn't see much of him, but, another up-and-coming player with clear talent and did not look out of place playing against grown men. So,
no.
Well done.
I think we'll see quite a few of these young kids, I guess, that filled out the rest of that 25, probably get a fair bit more time in New South Wales Cup this year, really playing against men. So,
yeah. Mate, so let's go through Lachie Galvin. Everyone, I'm sure, from both teams noticed Lachlan Galvin on the paddock. And what was it about his performance in particular that caught your eye? This is a child. Sorry, Lachie. This is a kid. This is a kid who, he was in school 3 months ago.
Yeah, he just got his HSC. Just finished his HSC, essentially.
Same as Steve,
he's confident, and that's something that, he didn't make. He made a couple of poor choices in terms of attack, but it didn't rattle him. He didn't go back into his shell or anything like that. He just kept playing to his natural ability. And again, he was one that I didn't even. He was on your radar. It wasn't on my radar a year ago. But after his performance, at Australian schoolboys for the high school tournaments, all that stuff has definitely come into everyone's view. And it was it was going to be interesting to how he would stand up, and I think again he potentially might have played himself into a round 2 jersey.
Again, look, at the very least, he's put himself in the frame, as we said before.
Yeah.
You know, I think the safe money is still on Aiden and Bud getting the nod, as you would expect, experienced campaigners. But look, if you look, I guess, as to who would partner Caesar, say, for example, and they've got that experienced head at least in one half, I'd if I was Bud, I'd be looking over my shoulder, because whilst he played safe, he was not particularly outstanding. I think Lockie was outstanding. Mate, for me, it was his poise, and it's probably just another way to say exactly what you just said, but to go into that sort of game and to be able to move and make decisions that you need to make, such that even some of the more intricate decisions that he had to make as well, like some of the go to the line short ball, where he was at risk. We spoke about last week about the likes of what Bud does on occasion, or has done coming through the grades. A lot of those short balls, putting himself at risk of a shot, playing the line, straightening the attack like that. He did quite a bit of that. The way that he chimed in looked effortless for me. And I remember actually mid-game seeing when he swept around to the left to catch the ball to throw to Buller to go. He was on the right at that point. He was playing right centre. Whether he'd come in at that stage for Stafford maybe. But I remember thinking at that moment, oh, that's right. This is the kid who's been winning everything in terms of fitness over the pre-season. It's the entire squad. So I was worried briefly he was going to burn out, and then I thought, of all people to burn out and waste nervous energy and youthful energy and get ragdolled a little bit, it was very impressive. So it was not going to be him, mate. He was put on that right side too. Correct me if I'm wrong. Against when Sully and Sil were both over there, and more than held his own.
I think so. I think that's kind of it's funny. I was talking about how when Seyfarth came off and Twelve came on, that middle tightened. I think it was when he went over to that side and partnered Bud in the centres. That's when things started to tighten up a little bit as well, which is not something you say for an 18-year-old kid who has played in the halves. Hasn't played in the centres, could have played in the centres a couple of games. The majority of his time has been in the halves. Yeah. So, again, I think predominantly his natural ability.
Yeah.
His fitness definitely would have helped him with that. I mean, being able, we all know what it's like to try to defend under fatigue. Very, very difficult. So, I think, for me, if we're going to start Caesar and Bud, I'd be more than happy to throw him the 14 jersey.
Yeah, well, he showed his versatility on the weekend. It seemed like everything they put in front of him, he did quite well. He may have even been pushed into lock briefly at one stage. Now,
I think he was,
second row, 5'8", centre and lock. I think that sounds about right. He's played second row in the juniors, he's played centre in the juniors, and he's played 5'8". Obviously, he's predominantly a 5'8". I think at one stage he was a halfback, and then he just shot through the roof. Fun fact about Lockie Galvin, his Parramatta told him he was too small originally, several years ago.
Then he got a growth spurt.
Yeah, he's both a Tigers and a Parramatta junior. Was originally at Parramatta and Harold Matts, then moved to Western Suburbs, and obviously was part of that undefeated Western Suburbs Harold Matts side, the likes that contain Kit and TDS and whatnot as well, a couple of years ago. Now, this is Lockie Galvin hasn't played a game of flag or New South Wales Cup, so he hasn't played, I guess, anybody over there unless he's played grade football back home, but. Or in and around the grounds, but my assumption is obviously not, being a contracted player. But so the last time he was playing, essentially, other than the Australian Schoolboy Championships, was SG Ball. And so to the jump in that level, not only in terms of the speed and all that sort of stuff, but just the physicality. And then you've run into a side that is on, that's running particularly hard against your team, who's largely backpedaling. And then you've been placed on the side in an unfamiliar position against two of probably the most damaging players on the night in Sewer and Sully, and you hold your own. Mate, he did very well, very, very well in defence. He, in attack, as we said, as both of us said, he took good options. He has good vision. Mate, to me, he just looks like one of those players that has time. As soon as he gets the ball in his hands, he moves and glides so well, and he just looks like he has time to make his decisions. And that's what a lot of the good coaches of him coming through have said, is that he is the type of person that looks like he's got an age to make a decision and rarely makes the wrong one, which is one of those in many ways, it's one of those skills that's just an innate instinct of the game. And
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
that natural ability.
yeah,
Not really something you can teach.
no, it can be quite difficult. Yeah, and it's almost hard to quantify taking the right decision. But yeah, mate, I did mention briefly before I went on a brief sort of run there. Just I do have concerns about him physically. I have concerns about his ability to be able to play long minutes, much less 80 minutes. I just don't think that that's feasible. Personally, I was that impressed, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. I didn't think he was quite ready heading into the trial in terms of being first grade ready. I thought he's an outstanding prospect, but I thought he needs time, like most 18-year-olds, you would assume. And so my big concern would be around the workload, around the impact, and just physically. I think he's up to it as a playmaker and what he can offer in that regard. From what I've seen, on the trial on the weekend and some of the junior footage I've seen of him, but that's my big concern. I don't mind your concept of picking him in the 14. I just have concerns about him physically, particularly he's not the type of bloke who has filled out just yet. You look at Kit, who played in the same age. Kit's built like a mini Taumalolo.
Yeah.
And they're the same age. I don't have any concerns for Kit Leilani in terms of handling the physicality. But, yeah, Lockie, I do. But obviously on the weekend he did exceptionally well in that regard too. So who am I to say that?
I think what probably would push me even harder into trying to get him to that 14 jersey is when you look at when he was put in that position to come on in the halves, he came on when everyone was a little bit drained, a little bit tired, and that's kind of what I envision him being able to do. You get that really conservative play from your Caesars, from your Buds, earn the right to play expansive football, and then when Appy wants a break, do what you've suggested, push Appy onto the bench, Bud into hooker just to get that service, but then have the likes of Galvin to make those right decisions at the right time against a tired defence.
Mm. Yeah. No, mate, I agree. And it's going to be interesting to see how and when he's used this year, whether he's deployed straight up. I don't know. We don't. There's a lot of unknowns, isn't there? Because Benji is unknown as a coach. We don't know what his selection patterns are like. We don't know, other than what we've been told and what the brief trial that we've seen, what his game plan system is going to be like. So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be an exciting ride, I guess.
Yeah, well, the only thing that Benji has told us, there's only one person that is guaranteed spot, and that's Appy. And probably Bateman because he's the vice captain. But those two is probably the only ones that have their guarantee.
And I'd probably say Stephen Clem up front, I reckon, at the moment, even if he didn't say
Buller.
It's a fair bet. Yeah, there's probably a couple in there. I reckon Benji might be pulling the old leg. Little bug.
I messaged him after he put that out, and he just said, look, take it with a grain of salt. Then he actually called me his best mate. It was really weird.
Yeah, it was. And then you woke up. It was his birthday the other day.
It was a great dream.
It was actually his birthday the other day. And I did send him a text message. Hey there, champion. Quentin. Happy B-Day. Okay. Again, and then I woke up. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, you just messaged back, new phone, who dis?
Mate, the show must be getting long in the tooth. The jokes are getting worse. I just want to make it... Did you want to mention anything about that trial before we sort of move on and work towards wrapping up the show?
No, I think we've talked about that at length. Everyone is probably in agreement with our opinion. Again, apparently we're probably seeing too many positives where there's too many negatives. But hey, you gotta try to see silver linings in everything, don't you?
Yeah, there is. And look, there's plenty of people that can tear apart our performances and look at the many often negatives. And we certainly will over the course of this season as well. Don't think we're not going down that route. But I guess at the start of the year, we don't want to put dampeners or blankets over what is usually hope springs eternal when it comes to the West Tigers. So, obviously we've been a little bit more scything, a little bit more critical this week, and rightly so, with what was a pretty droll performance, to put it nicely. But yeah, as always, I think if you're not pulling any positives out of any game, you're not looking hard enough. And there definitely was a handful in there, but most certainly, unequivocally, a lot to fix. So hopefully the boys get to work, and that was a bit of an off night, as it were, and we're still on track to see some improvements, particularly early in the year.
Yeah, definitely.
Mate, before we jump into a little PSAs to wrap up the show, I just wanted to make mention as well. Now, obviously, there's another junior round coming up this week. And if you have access to, or if you would like to follow as best you can, the West Tigers under-19s SG ball side, they have stacked it, to put it nicely. So many of our junior players, or our younger, better SG ball under-19s, for those people playing at home who aren't sure, many of our better under-19s players, SG ball players, are either part of the summer training squad or even possibly, in the case of a handful of them, in our top 30 themselves. A bit of a suspect clause in some of their contracts, unfortunately, led us with a very youthful top 30. However, I will say that the side that they have named on the weekend is probably about as strong as it can get at the moment in terms of our club, and I think it's going to do pretty well. I'm touching a wooden table at the moment, but we've got Heath Mason that we saw on the weekend at fullback. We've got Nav Willett on the wing, who's done great work since he's come down from Taree, the young lad. William Craig, Luke Lealali'i, Kit's brother, look out for them in the centres. Then, if I jump ahead a few people, we've got Jordan Miller, who's in our top 30, up-and-coming prop. We all know Talon De Silva, the starting hooker, which bodes well. We've then got the likes of Kit Lealali'i locking the scrum, still eligible for SG ball, mind you. And there's a couple of other really handy little names in there as well, but well worth a watch if you've got access to it. They're coming off the back of a 48-6 win over the North Sydney Bears in the SG ball comp. So if you get the opportunity, follow along. And we'll do our very best with no football for us this weekend in terms of the Tigers to try to make sure we can keep our junior pathways results as updated as we can. We do that whenever we can, as best we can. So follow along on our socials, whether it's Insta or Facebook. We try to keep up to date with that. But yeah, mate, the SG ball game on the weekend should be a good one. Fingers crossed the boys can put in a good performance and really flex their muscle a little.
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, given there is no Tigers game this weekend, I think that might be something that I guess every passionate Tigers fan will probably be watching, including the both of us, and maybe that's something that we break down next week to fill another episode.
That's it. We'll have a bit of a look at that and see how the boys went on the weekend. Bit of a hunch they might rack up a bit of a score, but we'll see how we go. All right, mate, we might jump into the PSAs, folks. We always say every single week there are two podcasts that do things as well as us. Of course, the wonderful people over at the West Tigers podcast. They do great work. You know them. You love them. They've got their West Tigers podcast forum as well. They should be the first stop on your docket every single week. A close second, no, it should be us there somewhere, of course, but a close second is going to be Westlife podcast. Same thing, different team. Those boys, again, different approaches, different perspectives. I love getting different perspectives from all of these different commentators. They all bring something to the table. Those two podcasts get around them. They are fantastic. And as we've started adding briefly in there as well, if you are over there, tell them who sent you. The blokes from West Tigers podcast, which is not us. Tiger Town podcast.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Mate, they've got a double plug. Good on them.
Give us
The show must be getting along. I'm forgetting what the name of the title of the show is. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, and now, Toby?
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts. You may well be listening to it right now. And the reason that we've been able to get ourselves on Apple Podcasts is with the help from the wonderful people at Best On Ground Digital, bestongrounddigital.com, the marketing agency, the digital marketing agency that looks after the little guys, bestongrounddigital.com, whether you need to get your own podcast on Apple Podcasts or not. They do a variety of things. They're experts, bestongrounddigital.com. Thanks to those guys for supporting the show. Mate, there's no bold predictions this week.
No. I got a bold prediction. We won't lose a game this weekend.
Ooh. Mate, we've got juniors playing.
I meant the first grade. I'm not going to put the mockers on the younger guys.
Yeah, that's not fair, mate. The weight of expectation. Well, my friend, I hope you have a good weekend. We'll no doubt talk about some of the juniors over the weekend as well. If you haven't already hopped onto one of our socials, please hop on and follow, even if it's to tell us how fantastic Toby's beard is and how horrible my mustache is. Do your best, do your worst. Folks, thanks for tuning in. As always, we appreciate it to the nth degree. And as always, Toby, my friend, go the West Tigers.
Go the Tigers.